Hi friends, Laura A. Grace here, the author of Dear Author Letters from a Bookish Fangirl and Team Lines of Poetry collection. I am so excited to be bringing a very rambly video today. Expect a longer video than I usually do because I am sharing my fangirl rambles about this anthology which I loved, of Myth and Monster by Phoenix Fiction Writers. Guys, I reviewed their previous anthology, Strange Waters, and I will leave a link below so you can go check it out. And I loved it. It was just, it blew me away in the creativity and the imagination of these said authors. It was awesome. So when I started of Myth and Monster, which many thanks to Phoenix Fiction Writers for this said paperback that is beautiful. Look at that. And the spine, which is equally stunning, and then the back. Like, guys, it is just amazing. I think this might actually be my favorite cover out of all of them because I don't know if it pops up, but there's a really cool texture on the letters, or the title, I should say, and there's even a texture here that's different than the actual of Myth and Monster. And then, of course, there's some scratches here that you can see. So when Phoenix Fiction Writers announced that they were doing another anthology, I was really, really excited because like I said, I love Strange Waters. So when they started sharing about it, I had really high expectations. Maybe I should have had such high expectations, but let me tell you, they did not disappoint. They did not let me down. I love this anthology. The stories were so incredibly moving, and I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on each of the stories, spoiler free, so no worries there, and just sort of gush about all of them because they did just an incredible job of taking myths I had never heard of or monsters I had never heard of and putting a really fresh and unique twist on some of them. Let's just jump right in, okay? The first story is Mistakes Were Made by Hannah Heath. And I really enjoyed this story. It just was very vibrant and it literally just jumped off the page. I don't know how to say the girl's name, so I feel bad. It's Spanish. And I tried even going to Google Translate to see how I could say it. And I was like, I don't know. But I feel like she probably wouldn't mind if I butchered her name. Like, she's just this character that's very spunky and fairly opinionated, but also very supportive and very caring. I have never read a character that had diabetes and how that really plays a fairly big part in the story. I loved how she was just a college student and how she was horrible at art. I don't know why that makes me laugh, but it does. And I guess maybe just because of her internal dialogue and even external dialogue. Like I said, it's just very vibrant. It is a fun and awesome story. And I loved how the myth monster came into play, how the diabetes came into play with all of that. It was just a refreshing story. And I can say I have read nothing like it. And it had such strong diversity, I guess you would say, since they're Hispanic, and the ending was just so great with her best friend. And I love how, like, what is it, platonic? Is that what it is? But when you have a friendship between a guy and a girl and there's no relationship there, they're just really good friends, and there is definitely in that in Hannah's story. So that was really, really great. And I will say, like, with the anthology kicking off with their story, I was already invested, but I was like invested even more. And I continue to be more invested with the next story is The Boy Who Listened by Kyle Robert Schultz. I was sort of surprised, to be honest, because his stories are usually really funny, and this one was more of a serious overtone. And that's not a bad thing. I don't mean that in a bad way or anything like that. In fact, The Boy Who Listened made me like tear up. It was a heart-moving story, and you have this magic academy, and you have Noah who doesn't talk, and it's not that he can't, he just talks differently. So he's the boy who listened, and his best friend, I guess sort of like best friend, Caitlin, is like the chosen one. And so she's talking to Noah all the time about, basically like the burdens and the pressure that is on her. As the story progresses, because Noah does not talk a lot outwardly, you get this beautiful, fantastic internal dialogue. That was just incredible. I didn't think that somebody could write a character where they hardly speak. Take Boba Fett for a case in point, who doesn't speak, but his aura or his character just really jumps off the page, and Noah was just like that. And he just pulled my heartstring, and especially that ending. Oh my goodness, that ending, because it is just perfect. I mean, that's all there is to say. It was a really moving story, though, and it was one I definitely teared up, and I had to stop reading any stories to just sort of let that sink in. The next story is Hero by Beth Wengler, and those are abbreviated for Hero. This story was one of my favorite stories in this anthology. Hestia was just a compelling character. I'm not really sure where to start, but I will admit that as someone who does, more often than I prefer, I should say, deals with anxiety and their own fears, I don't personally really enjoy reading that on page. However, Hestia has quite a bit of fear, and rather than it turning me away from this story, I feel like I just had this connection with her almost instantly. I can relate to that feeling of wanting to be brave and continue sort of going through, not a cycle, but going with your pattern, your life patterns that you do. You don't want to disrupt that pattern, but you also do want to be brave, but there's times where you're like, I just want this to stop. And Hestia was just so deeply relatable on that with many different areas in my own personal life. And I felt because I could relate to that I just was drawn to Hestia. Her struggle and just the things that she feels was so transparent. I loved it. I loved the word building. I love the twist that was in there with the said monster and just these small little things that she does to be brave. And the ending, oh my goodness, is when it just encouraged my heart so very much because she has like these fears and this anxiety. And then at the end, she is so very brave. And it just touched my heart and really encouraged me on a personal level. I can be brave like this fictional character, even though I'm not doing the same work she is. I have no desire to do the said work she's doing, but seeing her brave as she was really spoke to my heart. And not only that, but I left this story and I was like, I need a pet phoenix. The next story is The Gods of Troy by E.B. Dawson, and it's funny, I am not a huge sci-fi kind of person, but this almost, I feel like, was like a retelling, but like in space, was amazing. It is sort of, I feel in some ways, a little bit like a really loose retelling of the story of Odysseus. I don't remember all of the story from when I read it in high school, but man, it just had those vibes and that feel, and that was so cool. Like, even when the story starts, it kicks off with like a poem kind of thing of sorts, just like how I remember reading in the original story. The way these gods of Troy are involved and how things work and the spaceships and all of it was completely epic. I was really invested, especially as someone who's not, like I said, a huge sci-fi kind of person. I loved the setting. I loved it being in space. I love seeing his struggle come to life, so to speak. And that thing that happens at the end was sort of like, oh my goodness, like, why is this happening here? But a good kind of like, why is it happening? Well, maybe not for him, but as a reader reading, I should say, there was a lot of thought that went into this and a lot of like, I hope this is gonna end okay, because I'm a little nervous and clenched up and reading really intently to see what happens next. For sure, probably my favorite part though was the space monster. That's all I'm gonna say about that, but that was a really cool word building element and I really, really enjoyed that. The next story is a really fun one. It is the Unicorn Tamer by C. Scott Frank. There are so many like Easter eggs in this story, and it was the one that I laughed the most when it came to all of the stories in this anthology. I mean, it's hard when they sort of basically resemble like Ewoks from Star Wars, and his name is Wubnub, and he is just so adorable, and because he's grumpy, it adds to his whole charm, which I think is not what he wants. Plus, it has a unicorn, and the unicorn was completely epic. I surprisingly really related to Wubnub's people and loving their things not changing and their glitter island, and I was like, man, I really see myself in Wubnub's people, and so I sort of felt that made it a little bit more thought-provoking than just being a very humorous story, even though there was a part that really sort of tore at my heart a little bit when things are happening. That's a really big spoiler, but when things are happening and things are being explained to Wubnub, that sort of hit a little close to home, and it was a good way, but I do feel Wubnub, for all of his cuteness, was a really fun character, but also really relatable. I think a lot of people would really enjoy just the mini Easter eggs that are in here, because I know my husband did when I told him about this story. Plus, unicorn. That is all you need to know. The next story, I feel really bad. I am totally biased, but the next story was my favorite out of all of the stories, and that is Lamp of Silver by Grace Crandall. I don't know why this story, guys, hit me as strong as it did. Maybe because I recently started the anime One Piece, and so I've really been on this like pirate kind of kick thing and really just wanting piratey stuff in my own stories. But this story made me want it even more. I think Lamp of Silver was so moving because it was unexpected and what I saw coming and thought what would be happening. And it starts off fairly intense and you're thinking, okay, this person is going to die. Then events unfold and you get like a story within a story, and it was so good, guys. It was so good. It's hard for me to talk about this one without giving major spoilers, but I loved the captain. I loved the story that he shares. I love his anger that he had, because I felt like if I was in said situation, I would be having the same kind of anger issues, so to speak. Just everything about this story. And then getting to the end. Oh my goodness, getting to the end was like, it hit me in the heart. Like, I almost started crying. In fact, I definitely put the anthology down for a few hours to just let this story sink in. And I just kept rethinking about it in my head as I was going to get groceries and such. And it was just a fantastic story. I loved it. I would come back just to read it for the story alone. I loved the whole anthology, but this story really, really hit me and resonated with me after I actually read the anthology. She was one of the authors I went and looked up because I was so intrigued by this unique story world that she had made and just this beautiful message that came across. So Lamp of Silver, as hard as it is to say, was my favorite story. The next story was really interesting, and that is The Staff of Kalawer. It was by Dec Matthews. This story I felt had a little bit of like a slower pace that made you just sort of like at first sit back and relax, take a deep breath, feel Raylan's struggle, and then we just go head first into this adventure that really was awesome. I was actually unprepared for that. I sort of expected like a medieval kind of thing, and I guess there is some medieval flair, but it's definitely more fantasy kind of medieval kind of thing. But the companionship that's there and the secrets that unfold and such was awesome. Oh my goodness, I really loved the magical aspect of this story. There's not much you can say. Like, you need that part of the story to be savored and appreciated without me telling a bunch about it. So this one will be a little bit vague. He's like a scribe in a way, and I can resonate with his wanting to gain more knowledge, sort of not for necessarily, for sort of for the sake of knowledge in a way, not because you have an angle of wanting to please someone. Yes, sometimes you do, but you personally just want to know more. And I love that about him. I thought he was a really interesting hero because of that, like just the way his education played a role in a large part of this story, and how that affects the end was fantastic. Absolutely great. So it was a really good story. The next story is Aura by Nate Philbrick. And let me tell you, I am pretty 99% sure Nate was the one who made me cry in Strange Waters. Okay, the boy with the backpack. Oh my goodness. So like, I didn't recognize it at first. I should have recognized it. I should have prepared myself. I should have had my box of tissues, but I did not have my box of tissues ready. Next time, I will, Nate. If you're watching this video, I will prepare myself for the next story I read by you. Guys, I don't know what it is. Nate's storytelling is just powerful. And Oliver and Monica made me tear up more than once when reading this story. Like, especially Oliver. Like, oh my goodness. Like, his sacrifice, his love for Monica, and just Everything surrounding their story is just so, it pulled at my heart. I think this was the most romantic story in this anthology, and I absolutely just ate it up like it was candy. And having the myth, the monster part come into play was like, oh, it gives me goosebumps just thinking about it because it was so beautiful and so unexpected. Here I was expecting this one thing to happen, and then another thing happened, and then just other things happen, and then the final page comes, and I'm just like, oh! I feel like Nate owes me a box of tissues after that, to be honest. I say all that. If you understood all of that fangirlness that just happened, it was fantastic. Nate is just, he blew it out the park once again, and I hope I'm not the only reader he made cry. It was definitely a heart-moving story, and I loved how these sort of have like this diary little bit aspect with the actual story itself. It just added to the whole effect. Guys, it was just heart-moving. It was just really, really heart-moving. His story was another one of my favorite stories, despite how I felt like my heart was about to be like ripped out. But thankfully, Nate put my heart back in and everything was okay and I was okay. But oh man, you need to prepare yourself for this story. And not just that one, okay? You need to prepare your heart for like all of these stories, but then it's like a whopper for the last story, The Eyes of Vargas by J.E. Prozzi, I think that's how you say her name. I don't even know what to say. Coming out from Nate's story, coming into this one, it just leaves you a hot mess. The fear in this story really jumped off the page, and I told my husband as I read, I was like, I'm really glad I'm not reading this story alone right now. Thanks for being in the room with me, because oh, it had me like just sort of like, you know, moving around on my couch, you know, feeling a little like I need to look behind my shoulder, and I'm just like, it's just me, this is just a story, it's okay. But there was some good tension in this story that leaves you really on edge a little bit. Bring in the fear of Ava, our main character, and it just combines to make this heart-gripping story, especially as you're reading about her past or you're hearing about her past, and then you're seeing things that are going on as she's talking to her sister, and then just things physically going on around her. I have to say that probably out of all the monsters, I think this one might have been the like top quote-unquote baddie that made me definitely feel a little squirmish. I sank a little bit in my couch and a little bit more of a cocoon to stay safe as I was reading, but I was really unprepared for the twist of how exactly this monster slash myth comes into play. I was not expecting that. There were definitely some really emotional moments at the end of this story, and I think it was a great conclusion to this whole fantastic anthology. As you can see, this video has been fairly long because I loved all of these stories. They were awesome. Of Myth and Monster, I highly recommend, especially if you enjoy reading short stories and you're looking to just meet and discover new authors. There is something for I feel like every reader in this book. If you like romance, if you love fantasy, if you like sci-fi, if you like a little bit of mystery, if you like being on the edge of your seat, if you like crying, everything is in this anthology, so I highly recommend it. Let me know, have you read any of Phoenix Fiction Writers' anthologies? Have you read any of their books? Tell me all about it in the comments. I would love to hear from you. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Thanks so much for watching. Bye!